Welcome to the Fair Game Podcast, where we explore discrimination in sports. I'm your host, Peter Poichok, and today we're looking at racism, an issue that has been around for centuries, not just in sports, but in society. In all forms of sport, racism continues to affect athletes, fans, and communities. There are some organizations working to fight against racism, such as Kick It Out, which is an organization working to fight discrimination and make football inclusive. They run campaigns to make sure football is always welcoming to people. They work closely with the Premier League to tackle all forms of discrimination, including racism, sexism, and homophobia. Show Racism the Red Card is the UK's leading anti-racism educational charity. Their campaign work includes delivering educational workshops in schools, workplaces, and events held at football stadiums, providing sessions to over 50,000 people per year. There are other groups that promote diversity, equality, and inclusivity, whether they are a charity, organisation, or a supporters group. Teams all across the UK have groups dedicated to multiculturalism and equality, making football a safe space for all. Over the past few years, there have been some major cases of racism, so I'll just go over a few. After the Euro 2020 final, in which Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka missed crucial penalties in England's defeat to Italy, the three players were subjected to racial abuse on social media. Rashford's mural, which was painted in 2020 due to his campaigning for free school meals, was defaced after the match, which led to the community coming together to cover the mural with supporting messages to the England star. Speaking of Italy, Mario Balotelli has been the target of abuse for over 10 years. In a 2013 interview, the Italian stated that racism makes him feel alone, while in 2019, in a match against Hellas Verona in the Serie A, he kicked the ball into the crowd and threatened to walk off the pitch following the abuse by the opposition fans. Probably the most racially abused player in the world right now, Vinicius Jr., has been the centre of racial abuse for the past 4 to 5 years. In 2023, in a match against Valencia, monkey noises were aimed at the Brazilian, which led to multiple arrests by Spanish authorities and have led to debate about racism in sport and whether Spanish society has a problem with the issue. In January 2024, after the Madrid derby, Atletico Madrid supporters were caught on camera chanting "Vinicius, you are a monkey." Players in Spain and Italy have been the target of racial abuse for over a decade, the main examples being Mario Balotelli and Vinicius Jr. However, there are plenty more players who have experienced such terrible abuse. These are just a few of the many instances that this has happened, and there are a lot more examples that I could mention, and it really is a shame that it keeps on happening, and it shows that we do need campaigners to raise awareness and fight these issues. I would like to go over the stories of two very important men in their sport, Lewis Hamilton and Brendon Batson, two of whom are trailblazers, two men who fought against adversity throughout their whole lives, and two men who campaigned for diversity and equality. From a young age, Lewis Hamilton was the target of racial abuse. He revealed in a 2023 interview that from the age of 6, he experienced severe racist abuse at school, saying that he had bananas thrown at him and was called the N-word several times, calling it the most traumatizing and difficult part of his life. Ever since the beginning of Formula 1 in 1950, it has been a sport dominated by white men, with little opportunities for anyone of colour, and even when the Brit made his debut in 2007, he became only the second black driver after Willie Ribbs to drive an F1 car. However, Hamilton was the first to actually start a race, while Ribbs was only able to test the car in 1985. Throughout his career, Hamilton has faced a fair share of adversity, especially due to his skin colour. In 2008, during pre-season testing in Barcelona, a group of Spanish fans did blackface and wore wigs and t-shirts with the words Hamilton's family written on them, after which he was booed and called a black shit. This blatant action of racism led to the FIA, who are the governing body of F1, to condemn the actions of the fans and threaten to take away Spain's 2 Grand Prix, stating, "The FIA are surprised and disappointed at the abuse directed at Lewis Hamilton. An act of this kind is a clear breach of the principles enshrined in the FIA statutes, and any repetition will result in sanctions." Unfortunately, this wasn't the last time he was racially abused. At the 2021 British Grand Prix, he and championship rival Max Verstappen collided on the first lap, which led to Verstappen having a scary crash at 51 Gs and being taken to the hospital. After the race, which Hamilton won, he was bombarded with racist comments on social media, which led to his team Mercedes and the FIA to release a joint statement, which read, "These people have no place in the sport. We urge that those responsible should be held accountable for their actions. Formula 1, the FIA, the drivers and the teams are working to build a more diverse and inclusive sport, and such unacceptable instances of online abuse must be highlighted and eliminated." And most recently, in 2022, a video of three-time Formula 1 world champion Nelson Piquet appeared online, in which he called Hamilton a racial slur in Portuguese, which led to much outrage from the public, especially as the Brit is adored in Brazil, the nation of Piquet. After the video surfaced, the 7-time champion posted on Twitter saying, "It's more than language. These archaic mindsets need to change and have no place in our sport. I've been surrounded by these attitudes and targeted my whole life. There has been plenty of time to learn. Time has come for action." And action would follow shortly, as Piquet was banned from the F1 paddock following his comments and was fined around £780,000 or around $953,000. Hamilton established Mission 44 with the vision to build a fairer, more inclusive future for young people around the world. They work with a network of partners to improve the lives of those from underrepresented groups. Since 2020, Lewis has been one of the most prominent supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement, campaigning for diversity and equality, attending protests, wearing BLM messaging, and even influenced Mercedes to adopt a black livery to combat racism. In December of 2021, he became known as Sir Lewis Hamilton after being knighted due to his exceptional services to motorsport and his advocacy for diversity and social issues. Brendon Batson is a name that some might not be familiar with, as he played in the 70s, but in English football, he is an important piece of history. He became the first black player in Arsenal's history when he made his debut in 1972 against Manchester United, and made another 9 appearances over the next 3 years for the Gunners. After which, he was signed by Cambridge United and would flourish under new manager Ron Atkinson, who awarded him the captain's armband, becoming ever present in a team that earned 2 consecutive promotions, including a league title. After 5 successful years, Batson left to join Atkinson at West Bromwich Albion. Together with Cyril Regis and Laurie Cunningham, they became known as the 3 Degrees, named after the pop trio of the same name. West Brom became the first top-flight team to regularly field 3 black players, battling intense racism to pave the way for players in the future. Batson was awarded an OBE and an MBE for his services to sport, and was inducted into the English Football Hall of Fame in 2024, cementing his legacy as a trailblazer. In his autobiography titled The Third Degree, Brendon talks extensively about his career and how much of it was affected by racism. I had the pleasure to sit down with the former West Brom star, discussing his career and his experiences as a player who was at the centre of racial abuse and what it was like to experience that. I also had the chance to ask him about his thoughts on racism in the modern day and what could be done to make a change. Have a listen. So Brendon, thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure.
So could you just introduce yourself to people who might not know you?
Well, my name is Brendon Batson. In my previous life, I was a professional footballer for 15, 16 years, started my career at Arsenal, didn't quite make it there, went to Cambridge United, smaller club, and then found my way into West Bromwich Albion in 1978, back in the top flight, which was great. Had to retire early, I was only 31 because of a knee injury, and I went on to become the Deputy Chief Executive of the PFA, Professional Footballers Association. And I've done other things, but I've always been involved in sports, and currently I chair the Players Foundation, which is a charity particularly for former players, although we still do with current players, but mainly for former players. And I also chair the Professional Players Federation, which is all the major player associations under one umbrella.
So, you were of course the first black player in Arsenal history. Could you just tell me a bit about that?
To be quite honest, I wasn't aware that I was the first black player. until literally I'd retired. It wasn't something that was uppermost in my mind. And it's only when somebody pointed out to me, I was speaking at an anti-racism event, and somebody deduced me and said, the first black player to play for Arsenal. I always say it's an accident at birth, really, and I had my opportunity. And yeah, it's something that other people seem to make a big thing about, but for me, it was just part of my journey.
I mean, of course, seeing, how many like black players have come through Arsenal, you might see yourself as like an inspiration to those players.
Well, I think at the time there were a lot of other black players making their way through, particularly in the lower divisions. The emergence of Viv Anderson at Nottingham Forest became the first black player to play for England, full England cap. My old teammate Laurie Cunningham actually was the first black player, I think, to put on an England shirt, in that he played for the under-23s at the time. So I think there would have been other young black players playing, local parks footballers. That's where I started. Suddenly seeing somebody visible playing in professional ranks, and I would hope that would have inspired them to say, or to know, that there was a professional career that they could pursue. Whereas in my time, and I think for other black players in my era, we had no visibility on the pitch. We didn't see any other black players, so we were stepping into the unknown up to a point. But we made our way, and talent can't be denied, and in the end, we got there.
So of course, after you move from Arsenal to Cambridge, obviously that's when you kind of made your breakthrough. Of course, being given the captain's armband and also, being a league winner. How was that from your perspective?
Well, when I left Arsenal, it was a huge disappointment to myself, because I thought I was good enough to play in the top flight. That wasn't the case, because I don't think my performances, I only played about a dozen games for Arsenal. The majority of this was a substitute. And obviously my performances weren't convincing enough for the management at the time. I knew I was good enough for the reserves. I've been playing in the Arsenal reserves for a number of years, but I wasn't good enough for the first team. So I had to leave and find another path, another way. And Cambridge United were the first club to come in for me. I didn't even know where they were, to be quite honest. About to be relegated from the old third division, League One, to the old fourth division, League Two. But I just wanted to be in somebody's first team. We got relegated at the end of that season. I joined the last couple of months, and I think we were bottom of the fourth division, literally the bottom of the fourth division, when they sacked the manager. And then Ron Atkinson, that was his first professional appointment. He came into my life, came into Cambridge United's life, and within a couple of seasons, we were winning the fourth division championship. And he had a massive influence on my career, as he did on others. And when he went to West Brom, I became his first signing, and gave me the opportunity to prove to myself that I could play in the top flight. And luckily, I joined a team that was on the rise, lots of mixture of youth and experience. And I managed to slot in after a few easily forgettable games. I managed to make my way. Yeah, it was great.
So of course, after a few successful years at Cambridge, so of course you moved to West Brom, teaming up with Laurie and Cyril. What was that like to, be like three black players, starting for West Brom?
Oh, it was great to meet with Laurie. So I'd seen Laurie. I'd never met him, never met Cyril, but I'd seen Laurie come through at Leyton Orient, because I was a London lad. I lived in Walthamstow, next door to Leyton. And I saw him come through the ranks at Leyton Orient. Always had an exceptional talent. I'd seen Cyril on television, huge physical presence, really strong, dynamic player. So it was great to join them. But not only that, I was joining a team, as I say, that was on the rise of it. Brian Robson was just making his way, turned out to be a fantastic player. Another young player, Derek Statham, left back. I'd never seen a player play fullback like Derek Statham, fantastic player. The skipper, John Weil, and Ali Robertson, the bedrock of the defence, the two centre halves, good players individually, but also as a pair, there was no one better, or no combination better. And we just had a nice combination. Tony Godden, goalkeeper who'd come through, sadly passed away over a month ago now. But he was a terrific player, and actually still holds the record for consecutive appearances. He made 228 consecutive appearances for West Brom. I don't think he'll ever be beaten. And we had the evergreen Tony Brown up front, and my old roommate, Ali Brown. And it was just a fantastic team I was very fortunate to join a team they'd come up from the old, from the second division under Johnny Giles. He left and Ron took over. And it was a team on the rise, and I was fortunate to have joined them when we were on the rise. And everybody talks about that 78 team. Sadly, we didn't win anything, but we played some memorable football, and I look back on it with a lot of fondness.
So speaking of 78, of course, the team made the UEFA Cup quarterfinals. Like, what was that for you? Like, what did that mean for the team to make it that far?
Well, I think we were playing such good football, and we were beating teams when I think sometimes other teams were underestimating us in a way, until they suddenly realised that we were a decent side, playing a very attractive and open football, and the fans loved it. And the UEFA experience was fantastic on a personal level. Bearing in mind, I'd come from the third division, the old third division, league, would it be League Two, League One, and it was a really exciting time, playing in Europe, particularly against Valencia, the team that had the world player at the time, Kempes, just won the World Cup with Argentina. And it was a fantastic journey. And that was looking back on it, that was part of the development of the club. Sadly, it didn't go on from, we had a couple of seasons where we qualified for Europe again, but West Brom are a selling club. And we lost people like Brian Robson, an emergent player, had a couple of great seasons with us. Remy Moses, both went to Man United. Ron went to Man United, took the two of them. And the team never really recovered from losing key players, and we didn't really replace them with the quality maybe that we needed to. And, things just sort of petered out a little bit. And you look back on it and you're thinking that was the start of maybe where we are at the moment, and, still in the Championship and lucky to be in there after the season we've had.
Yes, so of course, earlier you mentioned good football. What about the game of the century? West Brom Man U.
Well, I mean, that was a fantastic game, not just because of the goals, but the manner of the goals as well. But also, it was off the back of a hell of a run that we'd had leading up to the Christmas. We'd beaten Arsenal away, we'd beaten Bristol in the snow. We'd had a fantastic run of results before the big freeze came. But you look back on that game, and defences definitely weren't on top because there was 8 goals scored during the course of it. But it was memorable for the fact that it was played in such an open style, great competition between the two sets of players, but done in a really competitive, but almost like a respectful way. There was nothing bruising about it, but it was just good, solid football, lots of tackles going in, and people remember the goal by Lenny Cantillo. I think he won goal of the season in somewhere abroad, maybe Denmark. The goal by Cyril Regis it's only the other day I was told that the man of the match was Gary Bailey, the goalkeeper, the Man United goalkeeper. You don't get many goalkeepers getting man of the match when they've let in 5 goals.
No.
Man of the match, and he denied Cyril on several occasions, and it's a great shot of Cyril. It literally is a pose that became Cyril's symbol. He scored the 5th goal, finally got past Gary Bailey, and he wheels away with his arms in the air, big smile, big cheeks, big dimples in his cheeks. It was just a fantastic game. And, people look back on that. One of my most memorable games really was the Valencia game, drawing in Valencia and then beating them 2-0 at the Hawthorns. But I think most Albion fans will remember that 5-3 game at Old Trafford.
So, of course, you mentioned Lane Cantello. What about the blacks versus whites football match?
Well, again, people made a lot about it after the fact, but at the time, it was Lenny Cantello's testimonial. We'd had a series of testimonial games season after season, and they wanted something different. And somebody came up with the idea, let's have a white versus a black team. And it was just fantastic. There was a lot of excitement. There were lots of black players who hadn't come across, turning up on the day of the game, looking to get in the side and having a kick. And outside the stadium was bedlam, there's all sorts going on outside. You think we were downtown Kingston at times. And it was just a fantastic atmosphere. And there was no other thought or anything different apart from this is a game to raise some funds for a player who'd given loyal service to West Bromwich Albion and given him a bit of a send-off. And it was a fantastic day. In the dressing room, I remember Garth Crook saying, "It's only a testimonial, but by the way, we've got to beat them next door." So, and I think we won 3-2. I think it was 3-2 in the end. But it was a great occasion, and another one I fondly remember.
So of course, your career was sadly cut short due to a knee injury. But how does that affect someone as a player?
Well, it took me about 18 months, and I'd almost resigned myself to the fact that I wasn't going to be able to continue well before that, because I kept on having a series of operations. It wasn't working. I was trying to get myself fit, played in, pre-season game, struggled. My left knee, because my right knee was causing me all the trouble, then my left knee started to give me trouble. And so I became quite philosophical about it, because I had my first cartilage operation when I was 16. I just signed as an apprentice for Arsenal. In those days, you could sign at 15. I stayed on hospital an extra year. I signed at 16. So I signed in June 69, I think I signed, just before the breakup from school. And that October, I had my first knee op. So I became quite philosophical about it, thinking, because it took me a while to get over that first cartilage operation. And then when I had the second one, that's what the first. So my thinking was, I was pleased that I had a 15, nearly 16-year career, when that first operation when I was 16 may have finished me. So, but it's quite shattering. It's quite traumatic when you realize you're not going to be able to go back into the dressing room, meet your mates, train, go out on a Saturday or Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it is, and you have to find something else in order to live the rest of your life. I was married, I got 2 young kids. How am I going to earn a living? So all those things go through your mind, but then you have to be quite tough on yourself and say it's no point, crying over spilt milk, so to speak. You just got to get on with it and make another life.
So looking back at your illustrious career, what is your favorite moment?
Well, probably my favourite moment when I signed schoolboy forms at 14 with Arsenal Football Club, because the manager at the time was Bertie Mee, and funny enough, the assistant secretary at the time was Ken Fryer, who became the MD at Arsenal. Mr. Arsenal is known as. There's a little statue. Well, there's a statue of him as a schoolboy on the concourse at the Emirates, and he is just a fantastic guy. And every time I go back, infrequently now, to the Emirates, I see him, and it's a delight to see him. He's still going strong, and he's a fantastic guy. So I think Bertie Mee and my mum and my stepfather were there when I signed a schoolboy form, and they wish me all the best. They think I've got a career ahead of me in football, and wish me all the very best. So I remember that day very vividly. And I think to be able to say that you've had a career in professional football, doesn't matter at what level, I think if you've got that prefix professional in front of football, it means you've had to overcome a lot of hurdles, a lot of competition. You've got to be quite dedicated, very dedicated to your profession. And it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to work hard. And, I look back on it and I think, well, for somebody who came to England as a 9-year-old, never having seen football, I think I did quite well.
So of course, once you're retired, of course you did work for like the PFA, and of course you were awarded both an MBE and an OBE for your services to football. What was that like? How proud were you of yourself?
Well, when it came through, I think a lot of people have said that themselves. You get a letter come through. I think it was in a brown envelope, and I thought it was from the taxman. So I didn't really bother looking at it for a day or so. And I thought I'd better open it. And it's come from the Prime Minister's office. And they actually are saying that you're being almost invited to accept the award. And you have to reply back and say, yes, you're happy to receive it. And I remember showing my wife and thinking, Christ, what's all this about? And it is a bit, I'm trying to put it into words, it's a bit unsettling to begin with, because you're thinking, how has this happened? And it's about service to football, but I was doing my job. You have to be nominated, and there's a number of people who've got to support that nomination. And it was a surprise. I think sadly, my mum had passed away earlier that year, so she wasn't around to enjoy the moment. But having shared it with my family and friends in that year, I think they were probably more proud of me than I was of myself, so to speak. And it was a fantastic day out, going out to the palace and stuff like that. But it was a surprise, and to this day, it still remains a surprise that I've been awarded both those honours.
So, of course, you worked at the PFA. Of course, you were the deputy chief executive.
Yes, that's right.
So, what did that work involve?
Well, it's about advising and looking after the members of the PFA, the current players and former players. I've been involved with the PFA since I was at Cambridge United every club as a delegate. I became the delegate. I wanted to know more about the football industry. When I joined Cambridge, I knew nothing about the industry I was working in. So I wanted to find out more about the industry I was working in. The delegate at the time was a goalkeeper called Graham Smith. I started to chat to him. He told me a little bit about it, and I said, I'll be happy to take over. So I did that. And when I went to West Brom, I immediately took over the duties there. Then Gordon Taylor, who had not long become was general secretary at the time, he took over from Cliff Lloyd. He got in touch and invited me onto the management committee, which is the board for the players. It's now known as the Players Board. And so I got to know a lot about the PFA. And then when I was about to retire, I told Gordon I was struggling. Just a few months before that, Stevie Coppell had announced his retirement at Man United. Gordon invited me would I be interested in becoming chairman of the PFA, which I would have loved to have done. And I said, I'm struggling as well, Gordon. I think I'm going to have to retire. It's no point me taking it because I think I'm done. And then a while later, he asked me to join him. He's a great visionary, Gordon, and he did a fantastic job for the PFA. And he invited me to join him because he had a vision of growing the PFA to what it is today. And so I retired. I announced my retirement. I think it was January 84, or around Christmas time, 83, 84. And I joined the PFA later on that year as his assistant, and then subsequently became chief executive and deputy chief executive.
So of course you were also the managing director at West Brom. What was that like?
Briefly.
Yes, briefly.
Briefly, yeah. That didn't work out. I've been approached a couple of times by West Brom. I think another club had approached me, but I was very happy at the PFA and it didn't seem the right time. But then there was a new chairman, a new board was going to be put together. They approached me. The turning point would be if we got promoted to the Premier League. So he was asking me about contracts and stuff like that. And in the end, they asked me if I'd join the board. And I felt it was the right time. I'd been at the PFA 18 years. I knew the job inside out, and I wanted to maybe work in that sort of a club environment. And obviously West Brom, very close to my heart. So I took a punt at it, didn't work out, changed the model that was sold to me to join. And it didn't work out. Nobody's fault, really. The owner wanted to go in a different direction, and we got relegated, so we wanted to change things around. So there was a parting of the ways. No animosity. It was a great experience. I learned a lot from it, and it helped me in the next stage of my career, which was working for myself eventually. But it was all great experience, and again, I've got no regrets about my career in its different stages.
Okay, so I've got a few questions for you. So how difficult was it to be a footballer in the 70s in regards to racism?
It wasn't pleasant, but what a lot of people don't understand is that, and I'm talking in general now, not just about myself, I'm talking about black players coming through, we were being subjected to racial abuse on the parks pitches. Not only that, all black people were being subjected to racial abuse in the 70s, the rise of the National Front, walking up and down the street, you've been abuse was being hurled at you from passing cars, being on the tube. So it wasn't anything unusual. What was we had to contend with was the volume, because it wasn't just one or two people, it was thousands, so tens of thousands shouting abuse at you. So you had to get used to that. But it was almost something that acted as a way of you learning about yourself, about being resilient and facing down those races. My old teammate Cyril, bless him, his motivation was, well, give me the ball, I'll bang one into the back of the net, get the points, and I'll go home. My view was, well, I'll see you next week, I'll see you next month, I'll see you next year. If you think that abuse is going to drive you off the pitch, you're sadly mistaken. This is my profession. This is what I want to do. You're not going to chase me away. Looking back on it, the sad part of it is that the authorities did nothing. It was left to us as black players to deal with it ourselves. We did have the support of our teammates. I think the support of your supporters. I mean, the West Brom supporters were fantastic. But also, it seems an oddity that it took till 1993 to have a national anti-racism campaign. Bless him, another one we've lost, Herman Ousley, Lord Ousley, his idea. But the PFA, we jumped on it immediately, and everybody, black and white players, supported it. And also there was lots of local anti-racism, local supporters anti-racism campaigns. So it is something that we had to grow up with, and something that made us stronger, I believe. We had to be, as I say, resilient to go out there week in, week out and face down those racists.
So, of course, Cyril and Laurie were both phenomenal players and sadly aren't with us anymore. What is your favorite memory of them?
Well, it's not just about on the pitch, it's about socially as well. We sort of gravitated to each other naturally because we've walked in each other's shoes. We come from a shared background. And it was, looking at Laurie was very athletic, very balletic in his movements, very supple, did a bit of ballet, I think, when he was younger. Still was a real powerhouse and a real old-fashioned, I wouldn't say old-fashioned, a real centre-forward type, good on the ground, great shot and great in the air, a real handful for defenders. And again, I think we were fortunate that we were part of a really exciting team. If we weren't playing such attractive football, if we weren't scoring lots of goals as a team, a lot of supporters, and I include racists in that as well, admired us as a team, admired the excitement we brought. And it was just a joy to be in and around them. But socially, we went out a few times socially. They were both single lads, I was married, so it was a bit more difficult for me. But we went out socially and it was great fun, and we socially as a team, we got on very well together.
What was it like to be part of the Three Degrees? To be known by, and of course these days respected by millions of people.
Well, I think lots of people said, well, calling the 3 degrees wasn't very nice because it was almost like I'm not saying it was derogatory, but put that to one side. I think it was born of love, really. They just liked. I think it was Ron who nicknamed us the 3 degrees, and it got picked up by our supporters, and then it became an accepted term to refer to the three of us as the 3 degrees. And it was a bit of fun. And to this day, there was lots of pictures around at the time. To this day, I still get my friends texting me or sending through pictures of us, the three of us, pictures with the 3 degrees, because they were playing in Birmingham at a nightclub in Birmingham all those years ago. So it was just something at the time, and it remains so to this day.
So I had the opportunity to read your book. It was absolutely brilliant, and I found it very fascinating to see the things you experienced throughout your career. So I noted something down that you said. We can do better. We must do better. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, I think in relation to what we do, how we deal with racism.
Yeah, yes, it's at the end of the racism part. So
Yeah,
what? Yeah. So what does that mean to you as someone who experienced so much throughout not just your career, but your life?
Well, I think, if I look at it from a football point of view, football is not the silver bullet. Football can't solve the ills of the world, when it comes to racism. The disappointing thing for me is that you still see it being dealt with in a little bit of a bit of a laissez-faire, in a bit of a timid way. I look and see what's happened to the Brazilian player, Vinicius Junior, and he's still experiencing that, at matches, and now we've had it from an opponent. It's unusual for other players to racially abuse black players. It's unusual to this day. But I think the authorities, the authorities really have to deal with it in a much more severe way, because it keeps on going on. I've often said to myself, if a member of if a club is found that one of their players is their supporters are abusing black players, then the punishment should be, whether it be close the stadium or points deduction, but it should be for another team. If another team does it up in front of the authorities, then that team shouldn't be dealt with as a first offence. It should be a cumulative. And I think that would send a bit of a message. I think if you go back to the NFL many years ago under the Rooney Rule, if they breached certain parts of that rule and didn't appoint or give an interview to a black coach, then, or go through that process, then they'll be fined a certain amount. If another NFL club did the same thing and found guilty of not following through the process, that fine would be doubled, so they knew exactly what the punishment would be if they did it. They wouldn't be in front of the authorities as a first offender. So I don't know if I've explained that properly, but I do think at the moment the medicine that's being meted out to those offences, whether it be from crowds or from players, isn't working. They've got to think of another way of doing it that has the proper impact and showing that those transgressions are being dealt with in a much more harsh way.
So, how does it make you feel, as someone who experienced so much racism, to see action being taken against it?
Well, I suppose I would have to say, on a positive note, at least action is being taken against those perpetrators. But as I say, I think sometimes they've got to look and see whether or not those punishments are actually having the deterrent effect that they hope for. And at the moment, it doesn't seem to be working.
And my final question for you, what changes do you think can be done to tackle racism?
That's a really broad question. I think one of the things, as I mentioned, it isn't just football's issue, and football isn't the be-all and end-all in terms of curing the ills of the world. But I think when you look across nations and you see the rise of far-right movements, fascists, you see at home, you see our politicians, some of the language that they're using. You only have to look at the Reform Party and see some of those that are supposed to be their MPs or their members. As soon as they seem to join, then something seems to pop up that they posted things in the past which are out and out racist. And I think our leaders need to look or need to consider how they try and get messages across, the language that they use, because language is important. Because it would seem to me that their language is almost encouraging those with those extreme views, and those fascists and racists are using that as an excuse to say, well, our leaders are saying that, so we can do what we want. We see the rise of anti-Semitism, different forms of prejudice across the nation, and it does bother me. I've never known the UK to be in such turmoil as it is at the moment.
Brendon, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
To reiterate the point of the episode, racism is a terrible thing that can affect people mentally and sometimes physically. It is important that people are educated about the topic and that they see the effect they can have on people, and acting against it is necessary. I highly recommend that people educate themselves with other, more severe cases of racial abuse. Racism is something that affects everyone, and it's not just a problem from the past, it still affects people today, in sport and beyond. Education, awareness, and action can make a difference. And as Brendon said in his book, we can do better, we must do better. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow so you don't miss any future uploads. Thank you for listening.